Hi, everybody, and welcome to the introduction to the panel discussion of what you need to know before planning a study abroad. This was a webinar that was recorded on September 20th, 2019, and includes three panelists, Dr. Ann Shillingford Butler, Dr. Danita Hudson, and Dr. Cynthia Santos Dietz, and it was moderated by Dr. Lorianne Stretch, that's me, the Managing Director for IRCEP. IRCEP is the International Registry of Counselor Education Programs, and our vision is to provide global support for the professionalization of counseling and quality assurance in counselor education. We achieve this through our mission, which is to establish and maintain quality assurance standards in counselor education programs globally. We do this by promoting and maintaining quality assurance standards that are set by an international board. We facilitate opportunities for counselor education program reciprocity. We provide support and consultation to counselor education programs and facilitate information and resource exchange, and finally promote the professional counselor education standards to regulatory authorities and providing support to counselor education programs that are trying to legitimize and professionalize counselor education in their countries or locations. So that's a little bit about IRCEP. So when we talk about proposing a study abroad program, we really believe that there's a realistic timeline of 18 months to 2 years, and that you need to have qualified faculty leaders. And we do recommend at least 2 faculty leaders per, because in case something happens with one of the faculty leaders, there'll be a backup in country with the students. And then also having some sort of peer review for your study abroad. And now Dr. Danita Hudson is going to take over and talk a little bit about balance, academic rigor, and cultural enrichment, and how those two interact with each other.
So that brings us to the next part about academic rigor and cultural enrichment. And from my perspective, I think that we did a really good job balancing that. Our students spent a lot of time from an academic standpoint understanding mental health issues in the country, understanding what resources were already there, and reading about just government policies as it related to mental health. And then when they got there, they got the cultural experience, but were able to talk to many of the peers that they worked with in country about some of the mental health challenges and needs because they had done that additional work. And then how many credit hours? We used, and Dr. Stretch, you may have to help me with this, our idea, all our classes were 3 credit hours, so that just seemed to fit well into, it complemented what we already do.
Mm-hmm. So 45 hours of contact, yeah. Mm-hmm. For 3 credits, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was also important to plan our study abroad during school breaks. So our study abroad took place at the end of spring and before summer term started. That allowed students to finish up all work they had in any other classes, to focus on what we were doing, and then they received it incomplete until the study abroad was over and they were issued a grade at the end.
And I just add that many institutions follow the same organization. However, we do need to be aware of differences in terms of just logistics and where do you have to go to, who do you want to talk to. So that's very important in the beginning of the process, kind of get to know the people responsible to approve, to organize, to get the money organized, to get the students registered, to all of those things are very important. I also don't want you to be scared of the 2-year mark. We're just trying to be very realistic, and I'm with you on that as well, Dr. Hudson. It's just more about you being very organized, very intentional, have all the connections that you need, and go through all the hoops that you need to go to in terms of university regulations, and also having that connection with the host institution or country.
Yeah, I'm really thinking through liability, yeah.
I was going to share
all right.
study abroad
Go ahead.
with the island of Dominica, and I think there are 3 different systems I had to go through. One is, like you all mentioned, the institutional part, expectations at University of Central Florida. The other one is on the island, the folks that I had to to connect with who's in charge, who answers to what. And then the other part is the legal aspect, bringing those two together with the memorandum of understanding of the MOU. And I think that's the part that took the longest for me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that's really important is having that course structure, especially for, you know, Department of Ed, you know, having a syllabus and things like that. So how did you guys go about developing it? Was your study abroad part of a class, or was it just a trip that you were offering?
Mine
Go
was,
ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
sorry, we all want to talk about so much experience with this and we love it. And I think there is different ways to do this, but I believe we all agree that this is a study abroad program. So we were very intentional in all the study abroads that I have been participating on. I really did not want something to be a trip or a tourist, you know, travel experience. It was more about education, more about counseling, more about really making sure that the students will get something out of it. And that's why it's so important. For me, it has always been, and if you read anything or if you know me at all, relationships are very important. And that's why the 2-year mark is also very important. You actually need to know where are you going and who are you going with and what do you actually want to do. So obviously you can put together something to visit all the touristic places very quickly. But if you actually want experiences that are meaningful for the students, you really need to sit down and think what is the main purpose and what are the experiences or the main experiences at least that you need to put in together. The other thing that for me was very interesting is to know, especially when I took students to my country, it was kind of thinking about students that may not have previous experience in traveling, that have no idea what's going on, that they might need more hand-holding in terms of orientation, and also how tiring it is, especially for them that they were listening to Spanish all the time and not English. And for me as well, trying to translate everything. So those type of things I wasn't aware of before that. That was my first experience. So moving forward is like, you need to figure that out in terms of, again, Dr. Hudson talked about assignments, like how many assignments do you really need for what the purpose is, but also how many assignments can the participants do regarding their exhaustion, their shock of culture, their anticipation and excitement. So you have to balance that out. So it's very important for you to also kind of consult with other people that have done this before, so that you have just kind of the insights of that, because it's difficult. You really want to do everything. So kind of how do you decide to do that? What is the time frame? What is the cost? What are the credits? So all of that has to be involved within you building the course description and the study plan for the program.
Yeah, and I just pulled up a course description so you guys can continue to talk, so they can read that as well. So Anne, I think you were going to add something about syllabus or the structure.
Oh, I was gonna, well, part of my program it wasn't related to a course per se, but from the institution standpoint, we have to have a syllabus to go with it. So we had to develop one. And at UCF, we can do a variable credit. So you can go from 1 to 3 credits. For some students, the students that generally come with me on the study abroad, it's more for the immersion experience, not for the credit. So I go with 1 credit. So that's one thing to think about in developing a study abroad. Some students might actually need the credits to help them towards graduation or course or program requirements. So if you have it variable where it's either 1 to 3, then they can choose, okay, I'm going to sign up for it as a 3-credit course. But if they don't necessarily need the credits, then they have the option of just going for 1 credit, because tuition costs and all of that is something that they have to factor in. And then as part of the program, my students, I actually have them deliver a course to the folks that we visit down there. So we take training materials. So the students are really immersed in everything that we do. They have to do journals, going to the schools on the island. They are the ones who are delivering the mental health training sessions. So like Dr. Diaz said, you know, there are times opportunities for fun things, because I think that's also important for the immersion experience to learn about the other aspects of the culture, but really the students are immersed in the training part of the excursion as well.
Another really important topic is thinking through your budget, right? Because, and you just mentioned the importance of balancing like the tuition cost with the cost of the trip. And I know you had an example of a situation where the airfare skyrocketed and you had to make some changes.
Right, and that was planning like how many months ahead and looking at the airfare and waiting, okay, we're gonna wait to see if it goes down because we wanted to go during spring break. And that was a big mistake. And so that's a lesson that I learned too, looking ahead and planning different times during the year from the US when airfares are at peak. So now we go more towards May because airfare is cheaper. In March, spring break, almost everybody's on spring break, so airfares go up. And so we've had to switch the time frame for that. But then also, you know, the people that we're going to, it might be convenient, May might be convenient for us, but is that convenient for them? So that's another conversation I had to have with them.
Right, exactly. And go ahead, Dr.
And again, also, yeah, you can say Cynthia, that's fine. And again, the academic calendars are different and depending on the country that you're going to. So if you have a relationship, and I highly recommend that, have a relationship with a host institution, an academic institution, then you will have to take that into account as well in terms of budgeting and flights and when do you want to go to, because even if you have breaks here, they might not be on breaks, or they might be on breaks when you want to go. So you have to kind of balance that out and think of the money again ahead of time. What are the things that you want to do? I have been overseeing organizations or trips where the students need to, like the whole group get the same airfare and they all go together, especially when we talk about undergraduates. But then for Honduras, for example, I let them pick their flights and just kind of the recommendation was, let's everybody get there at this certain time so that we can go be together and have somebody kind of pick you up there. I was already in Honduras when they got there. But kind of that allows a little more flexibility in terms of them having their own ideas of how to do it, or using miles for their flights, or I know for the trip to Belize, the more recent, the students were actually getting some money back up from people and kind of having that sense as well. So somebody can donate miles or money for the students. This trip to Belize was really, really strong on trying to get the students that were underrepresented in general for underrepresented backgrounds. So we really wanted to make sure that we have some extra money to support them. So things like that are very important. And again, that mark of doing everything with enough time will give them enough time to get that money and get organized as well.
Dr. Stretch, can I add something before you move on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with our program, we were in a unique situation where we budgeted for the minimum amount of students, but our class was almost full. So we ended up with additional funds that were left over. And then on top of that, we had our vendor help to establish our budget. And when that occurred, they budgeted a little higher for some things. So we had a pretty good amount of money that was left over. I suggest for when you're planning a study abroad, that's something that you think about. What are you going to do with these extra funds? We didn't want the students to lose the money, so we paid for extra meals for them. We were able to put that money towards some other things that we wanted to do. Our program incorporated the mental health facilitation program, so we could use some of that money towards that. And so that's something else that may occur, is that you have more money than what you anticipated you'd have in the beginning.
Yeah, that's always a good problem to have, but it's one that you should plan for sure. Okay. And just, I think you guys have hit on a lot of these already. One of the pieces that I think I would just stress here is that I do think there's some value in having a diversity of academic disciplines and locations. Dr. Hudson, maybe you can speak to that, because that was definitely evident on our trip, and then others can jump in too.
Sure. So we went to Lima, Peru, and the majority of our trip was spent in the city of Lima, which is very different. It's much more modernized than the outskirts. And so we ended up having our students to build houses in a community that was about 2 hours away. That community was very different. Most of the people lived, you know, under tarps. In the dirt, and so building a house was very important for that community, and it was good for them to see that balance. One of the students had commented that in some ways she felt like, if you guys are familiar with the Hunger Game, that Lima was like, you know, the major city, and all of the outskirts were more you know, they were impoverished. And so having that experience allowed them to get a true sense of what the communities look like, and not just the idea that everyone was well off within the cities as they saw.
I also think that, you know, on our trip we had 10 students, and they were all from different disciplines. And I think that was another really enriching product. I know a lot of these are coming out of counseling, but we had a lot of other psychology students. Like we had students from applied behavioral analysis. We had students from organizational psych. Of course, we are a school of psychology, so it's a little different. But, you know, I do think there's some value in bringing in some different disciplines maybe, and that's a way to get a more robust study abroad. Sometimes you can't pull enough students from your own program, but if you're open to the idea of bringing in other disciplines, it really enriches the conversations and provides that interdisciplinary perspective that we're looking for and hoping that our students will develop the ability to work with other professionals as well. So I see some values in that when planning.
I think we had a few students from different universities even when we did the trip to Honduras and when the trip to Belize as well. And so that's different. I think we just need to be aware of how do we plan it. Again, the intentionality and the purpose, because obviously if you have more students for these different disciplines, it will look a little bit different in terms of how are you providing experiences that are meaningful to everyone, and what is the overarching theme that you want to try to come across. So it might be that all disciplines are mental health, so you can cover a lot of ground. But if you are including people from, you know, like if the students are coming from very, very different disciplines, then what is the main point? So kind of make sure that you have that purpose and that intention very clear on what it is that you want to. So in our case, it was always like different universities and programs, but they were all related to counseling. So I was able to include things that were related to counseling in terms of even like school counseling, or they visit different universities, they visit different centers for mental health. So if you have a student that has nothing to do with mental health, it won't be that excited about the experience as a whole. So.
Well, that's a great lead into our next slide, which is student selection. So how did y'all choose students? Y'all, you heard my Southern there. How did you choose students for your trip?
Well, and I can start since I was talking about it anyways. And I think the first idea is, again, going back, and it's a big circle in my head. So going back to what are the requirements for the program in the institution, how many students do you need, how much pool of students do you need, how many students do you have in your own program to see what is the interest and kind of how do you want to market. And again, going back to the intentionality, but overall, if you have the clear intention, if you know what you want, if you have the target goal of what is the minimum of number of students that you need to make the program in terms of, usually in terms of finances, then you just have to kind of work with marketing students that are going to be able to come with you, and that you can, well, the goal will be for you to reach those marks in terms of how many students. That is also to consider how many faculty are going and how much cost of the faculty you need to cover for that to happen as well. So that's kind of a relationship with that. We did do interviews, and we asked them to write some like letter of intent of the program. So we wanted to really know that the students were eager to go, that really wanted to go for the right reasons, that they understood the program was. We make sure that all the marketing materials were very clear in terms of what the purpose was and what are the main things that we were going to do within the program. And then it comes down to the final draw of paying the program as well, and going through those deadlines for the institution so that you can have that you can ensure that the student is coming, right? So you have to have that time frame to do that.
Did any of you have any accessibility issues on your trip that you had to think about or consider as you were doing any of the trips? I know we had some food challenges with ours.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for us, is the diets of our students. Some of them had some severe allergies, and we had to be really careful where we ate as a group, what foods were available to them. And at some point in time, because when we were in the outskirts of the city, and there wasn't many options, we actually just went to the grocery store and bought food that was, they were able to consume. And so I think that was a challenge for the students as well. I remember one student who had her card and her list of allergies, and she became frustrated at the beginning of the trip because it was very hard to find something that that she could eat, and she wasn't scared that she may have an allergic reaction to something that's in the food. And so that was really a growth process for her, to be able to kind of say, okay, I cannot get this, but what else may I be able to have? And so just really being more open and flexible, of course, recognizing that some of her allergies were severe, so being careful, but just willing to kind of recognize she's in a different environment, things aren't readily available as they are here, and how can she plan for that?
Wow. There are conversations that we had prior to going on our trips. I had students actually go on the website for the country and look at some of the food types and so on. So we had deep discussions about dietary restrictions, whether it's medical allergies or just preferences, that some of the things that you need may not be available. Also, medical supplies may not be available as readily as they are in the United States, right? This is a privilege that we have. So we had a lot of those types of discussions prior to the trip, and I really encourage students, if you know that you have dietary restrictions, pack up snacks, pack up, non-perishable items that we can bring with us so that you can secure yourself. If you know that there are particular medications that you need, and I listed them: allergies, Tylenol, pain medication, things for bug bites and so on. So we made sure that we had all of those things covered, so that when we went out, if the student, they would have the particular students had something in their backpack, so that if the restaurant that we went to, there was nothing that they could eat, they had something readily available that they brought with them. So we did that preparation prior to the trip.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to try to click on this and see if this works. Let's hope it works. This is a video of a trip.
This experience has been beyond my expectations. Students have gained so much from their interaction with the culture and the people, but also their interactions with each other. They're from various programs, and they've come together and created a small family.
We wanted our students to be exposed to history and culture, and to begin to experience the language and take risks with the languages. But then we also partnered them with university students with whom they were able to make some connections. They could build a bridge. We also partnered with an NGO and were able to take our students into a community that experiences pretty extreme poverty, and were able to provide a home for a family. this is one of the things that really sets the Chicago School apart. We want you out there in the world, experiencing what the world has to offer.
Seeing where they lived prior to us building the house, put things into perspective, and it gave us direction in terms of serving a purpose. I have been pushed to limits that I did not know I could even reach. Even though we were here for only 10 days, I truly believe that this is now taking me on a new path of being a global citizen. While for students at home, they had the opportunity to take on the role of leaders and teachers in the community. Be in touch with the people provides a hands-on experience that they're not going to get in any other situation.
Any student that's considering enrolling in study abroad, I would encourage them to do it as soon as they possibly can. It gives you an opportunity to see culture up close and personal. So that's an example of marketing. Now, we were very fortunate that we had a photographer, a videographer who traveled with us. But I think one of the things that's really important is really helping students understand by sharing the narratives of previous trips. I think that's one of the best selling points is to have students who've been in study abroad, they're sharing experiences that have happened in study abroad. This is kind of some of the map of what you need to think about as you're thinking about your marketing plan. Do any of the panelists want to mention anything else about marketing and how you marketed your trip?
I think it's just making a connection with, we were talking about in the slide before, it's really important to do marketing and orientation, kind of the preparation prior the student to make the final decision to go on the trip so that they have all the information. I think it has to be a very thought out decision of going. And like the dietary restriction is one of the things, but the other thing is, it's not the same for you to go to a study abroad in Europe that it is for you to come to Honduras, that it is for you to go to Africa. Are you ready and willing to do that? And Dr. Hansen also mentioned flexibility, how flexible you are, how ready are you, how, and physically, are you okay to do this? And how much physical work or demands would you need? And again, how much of other type of support you will need that may not be there. So kind of thinking of all of that and doing the marketing right, in terms of giving all the information necessary in terms of them to have the right idea. This is the trip, this is the main focus, this is what we want you to accomplish, and that's what you will need. May a good thing, because you don't want students to fall out of the trip, right when you actually have the numbers, or to have a position where you actually have to send the students home. You don't want to see that either, so kind of be prepared for that.
Yeah, I've actually had to go pick up a student from a study abroad and bring them home. So not a good experience to be an escort. And you mentioned this too, Cynthia, and I know you and I've had some great conversations about this, about what we have to do to prepare students for trips and getting them ready for the trips. So what are some of the things when you are going, on a trip that you want students to know ahead of the trip?
You will not always have AC.
Yeah.
You will not always have AC, and you got to be
or hot water.
Right.
And you have to be okay with it. Right.
That's good. And where are you
Yeah,
going?
one day, we went to, we were in it was called a hotel, but I think it was more of a hostel that we stayed at. And like all the women were in one room together. And for some students, that was a bit of a culture shock. And one student even mentioned, she was like, wow, I didn't expect that I'd be sleeping with everybody tonight. And the other student said, basically something along the lines of, well, we have a roof over our heads and not a tarp, and that was like a real adjustment for them to really think about where we had just been serving this community, and like that this was an inconvenience, but not a difficulty. Now, when we had to remove the scorpion from the bathroom, that was a little more interesting. But, those are the things you just have to be open to and be aware of. All right, let's talk about, we've already kind of talked about expectations. I will mention attire. I think it is important that depending on the culture of the community that you're going to really have students be attentive to the culture. I've done some trips where, you know, it wasn't appropriate to have skin showing. And so, you know, we had to really do some education with students about what to wear and when to wear it and what not to wear and where not to wear it. That was something that was really big. Anybody want to say anything about it?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Especially if you do trips with undergraduates, it's very hard. I think as an international, I can say, I hope that you allow me to say, that American people in general are not very aware of safety and safety issues and concerns in other countries. So that's one of the things that for me was very difficult, like walking around in San Jose, Costa Rica with like super short shorts was so not right. And that made me just go crazy in terms of, well, I need to, like, I know you have the right to dress whatever, you know, however you want to, but I know we don't have all the safety nets that you have in the United States to protect you. So kind of weigh that out and making sure that you're doing the right thing the right way and that you are safe to come back and that you're enjoying the trip. And you also be respectful of other people as well. And, you know, it's even in Honduras, like I know that I can wear short shorts in the coast, in the beach, but not in the main city, not in the capital. So kind of where is that appropriate and where are we going in the trip so that you are prepared to do that?
And one of the things, oh, go ahead, Anne.
I was just going to add to, just based on what Cynthia just mentioned, that for those who are planning to do a study abroad, it is extremely helpful if you're not from the country or you've never been there to visit first. When you're developing your contacts and so on, to go yourself. So some of the things that we're talking about, you might hear in the media, transportation, crime, clothing, and so on. But it's a whole different perspective when you've actually been there and you've experienced it yourself, and that you can come back and share with students. Well, this is what happens. This is what is expected of you, and so on. So I know there are financial constraints, but if somebody's planning a study abroad and they're able to actually visit the country first, that's a big problem.
And having some contacts as well within the country is important. And even for me, like we were two as well, you know, one faculty and I was the assistant for the trip in Honduras, and it was my country, so I really, really knew my country. And even then, there were things that I didn't thought of. So it was interesting to kind of reconnect and think about that. Like, for example, don't pet dogs on the street, because in Honduras they are not trained. They are not, you know, the same. They don't have the same health in terms of just of any random pet, you know, any random dog on the street. So even those type of things that I was not aware of, the other faculty that was American was able to see. So kind of have that connection between how can you connect with people from that country and that culture to inform you better. And definitely if you are able to go to the country and make those connections strongly, it's even better. And also have other ways to make connections, because you don't necessarily have to wait until you actually create a whole study abroad to make connections with the country and to start learning about their culture to get to that point of doing the study abroad or any other type of exchange.
Lorian, if you don't mind me adding something quickly, it just came to my mind. In the study abroad trips that I've done, I knew where we were going, that LGBTQ populations were not populations that were highly accepted there. So I had to have that conversation with students who were interested in going, that, hey, this is what the country, a lot of the individuals believe in there. These are some things that have happened before, so that students can really decide, if I'm LGBTQ, would I feel comfortable being in that environment? And so they had to make that decision, right. You know, do I really want to go? Would I feel safe? Would I be safe in there? So I think that's another big part of the discussion.
And I'm really glad you mentioned that, Anne, because I think that's a very important component, is we have to be willing to have difficult conversations with our students, because we don't want them to be unsafe. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. I mean, I do want them to have some discomfort, but I don't want them to be uncomfortable or feel unsafe. And, you know, Dr. Hudson and I had to have some pretty significant conversations with a few who discovered pisco sours, which is a very strong drink in Peru, you know, And so we had to have those conversations about, you know, you might not want to drink that much, you know, because they were very sick one day. And really having the, you know, we just had to have those discussions with them. Also had to talk about, you know, nightclubs, and yes, they're available, but do you really want to do this? And is it safe? And are you going as a group? And, you know, all of those things, we had to have those conversations, not because we're trying to parent, but because we're just trying to protect them. And they may think something is what it is in the U.S. and it's not in, you know, the countries that we may be visiting. So very important to really orient them. In fact, we had our vendor who was from Peru do part of the orientation for our students, and I felt like that was something that was really helpful to have somebody who was of the country speaking to the students about what was safe and what wasn't safe, and where to go and when to go and how to go.
And what are your regulations for the program as well? Because we have conversations similar to that in Costa Rica with undergraduate students that were not allowed to drink in the United States, but they could in Costa Rica. So are we, you know, are they allowed to do it? Do we have any concerns as a program? You know, we are responsible for the students no matter what. So what are the regulations that we have? And the same in Honduras, that I have grad students, and I think I did a great job in pairing them out with Honduran students. So they kind of talk a lot, they have information. But at some point they were like, oh yeah, they are telling me, the Honduran people were telling me that there is this nightclub that they go to, so we can go with them. I'm like, yeah, but you're not from here. You're kind of a red light on a traffic light. You know, everybody can see you. So it's different for you than it is for them, even if they do it all the time. It's not the same. So you're kind of having those conversations really openly and say, well, this is the reality of the situation, and what are we going to do about it?
So we came up with, Cynthia came up with these takeaways, and they're amazing takeaways, and that we wanted to make sure we highlighted, and that is that whenever you're planning a study abroad, to definitely have purpose and intentionality. Relationships are priority. You've got a plan, but you have to be flexible. You have to. I mean, we were changing things on the trip. Like, I think a great example of that, Dr. Hudson, talk about what, you know, we made some modifications to the schedule based on what we were seeing from the students. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with our itinerary, we had a lot of activities, excursions, and events planned for the trip, and some of them were all day long. So they would be getting together around 8 in the morning, and we wouldn't be arriving back until 8 o'clock at night. And after we did that for a couple of days, a few of the students said, you know, they were just tired. They just wanted to enjoy the city. They wanted to do some sightseeing on their own. And so Dr. Stretch and I sat down and we rearranged some things to give them more free time, so that they were able to kind of enjoy the city. Of course, like letting us know where they were going, when they left, when they returned, so we could kind of keep track of everyone. But just a willingness to be flexible, hearing what our students were saying they needed, and then addressing them as best we could. And we will. And others. Sorry, we will keep in track of weather as well, in terms of, you know, we have a lot of hurricane season in Honduras and in Costa Rica as well, so kind of keeping track of that and how everything was going. So I remember having to do a lot of checking of how things were in the country along the way within that 13 days that we were there. At some point, I think we were planning to go to downtown city, like the capital city downtown, and they have a, I forgot what is it called, some issues, some protesting going on in the downtown. So it's like, yeah, I'm not going to take this group downtown if they're protesting on the streets. So we actually had to turn around, and I sent them to a mountain hike. So, but it's like, okay, how are you doing that on the spot?
That's a great point. Like, we're not allowed to go if the security rating hits, what, 4 or higher, I think, Benita. So we have to monitor the Department of State rating for travel advisories. And if it hits a certain level, like we were going to do a trip to Mexico, we had to cancel. We couldn't do it because the security rating had gone up. But also, like, while we were in Peru, 11 of the last 13 presidents were thrown in jail while we were in Peru. You want to talk about political unrest? And, you know, I was like, okay, are we going to have to figure out how to get out of this city during a coup? You know, I'm like trying to figure, I'm like, Matt, because I remember saying to Danita, I know where the U.S. consulate is. We got that. Okay, I found the embassy. Good. We're in good places, you know? And it was like mapping out a plan for how we get to the embassy. But 2 weeks after we left Peru, they had a pretty significant earthquake. So, you know, things like this do happen, you know, while you're on trips, and you need to think ahead about what's my plan, even though you hope you never have to use it. So, Anne, any parting thoughts before we open it up for questions?
I was going to say, just, I know we are all counselors, but don't make promises that that we can't keep, and live the country a little bit better than when we were first there. Sometimes we want to fix things, and we want to promise, you know, the folks that we work with. In our case, they were the school counselors, that we wanted to do all these wonderful things with them when we knew very well that we weren't able to do those things. So a part of the difficult conversations that I have with the students before and while we're there is to not make promises that we can't keep.
Yep, that's awesome. Dr. Hudson, any parting thoughts?
You know, I just hearing what Anne was saying made me think about just kind of the level of emotions that many of the people in Lima had around mental health care. We ran into, with some of the students that we worked with, they really just wanted us to provide them with things that we could leave with them to be able to do better. Some of them for personal reasons, because they had members of their family who had mental health issues, and there wasn't enough resources there. And so one thing that our students did is they kept in contact with them, shared some of the resources that they use here, but recognize that, you know, true change isn't going to come from us spending a few hours with the students, but wanting to do what they can to continue the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cynthia.
I think, again, like this last slide is very important to me in terms of going back to the purpose, intentionality, that relationships are the center for me, that planning and that flexibility, but also that sustainability is really important. I wouldn't want to plan a whole program just to do it once, you know, like, so what else are you doing? And even if you don't go back to Honduras, like to the country to your host country, for example, I couldn't make another study abroad to Honduras just yet because of safety concerns and the Department of State. But since then, I have kept in contact with them, and I have collaborated. I think we are going to have a webinar as well coming up with Honduras soon. We have done things through my classes and kind of giving the opportunity for the students from here to connect with students in Honduras. So there are a lot of things that you can do, but I really, really encourage people to do more than just think about a one-time thing, and being able to actually connect and do something that is meaningful and impactful long-term.
Yeah, okay, good. So we have time for a couple of questions. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, you can put in the chat, or you certainly can come off mute if you have questions that you would like to ask. You've got these three wonderful panelists, and they're here, and they're happy to answer some questions. Hi, Anita.
Hi. How many students did each of you take? I heard one of you say 10, but I didn't hear numbers for the others.
Yeah, we had 10. We had 10 students with us.
I think I have
On both trips, 6.
6.
Oh, I have 13 for Honduras. I think maybe around 15 to Costa Rica and around 10 to Belize. So it depends of the country and depends of kind of the group of students, but it varies.
That gives me a good idea.
But I have seen like, again, depending on what is your minimum for the university, that will inform you. And for what I see, usually it's between 8 and 10 for a minimum for the regular price of a study abroad program. But also if you're doing something that is research related and you actually have funds for that, then you can have, 3 students, 4 students. So it depends on what the money looks like. If that helps.
Yeah, and different schools have different rules too about whether you can take PAs, how many faculty per student. Like in the Chicago school, we're required to have 2 faculty in case something happens to one. In fact, Danita and I didn't realize this when we did it, but we're not even supposed to travel on the same plane together in case there's a problem. But we traveled on the same plane. We messed up, but we weren't supposed to be on the same plane. So there's, all those types of things you have to think about too. Anybody else have other questions?
Hi, everyone. My question for you is, I don't know if you covered this already, but what was the process in determining the country that you were choosing to do your service project with?
Oh, that's a great question. Danita, you want to start, and then we'll go to Cynthia and Ann?
Yeah, so for us, we had an alumnus that was in Lima, Peru. She was actually in Peru during her time with us as a student. And so had all of these ideas about collaborating with us while she was with us as a student. And then after she graduated, we just had the opportunity to further develop those ideas. And so that was very helpful because she understood our program, she understood the school, she was familiar with the faculty. So just collaborating with her was very nice.
Accessibility.
Cynthia or Ann, go ahead.
I was going to say accessibility was helpful because I am from Dominica. I had contacts there. They had just been hit by Hurricane Maria a couple of years prior. So it just made sense that they really wanted and needed that mental health. So it worked out very well.
For me, again, it depends of the program. Obviously, the first one I did was in my home country, so that's very comfortable. I knew what I was doing and where I was going for the most part. But I think the contacts and connections are very, very important. I think the trip to Costa Rica was organized because they have a facility from, I believe, Georgia Tech or Georgia. Some big university in Georgia has a research facility in Costa Rica that you can rent to stay there. So that was a very, very big deal. And they have all the sustainability things going on, and they prepare the foods. And so that was kind of a very, very big thing. And for the trip to Belize, my recommendation was to find a country because it was the first time for that university to do a study abroad for counseling. And the faculty that they were in charge was their first time in doing a study abroad program as well. So I said, well, you have to consider if you want English language so that you're more comfortable doing it the first time. And if you do something very, very far away, it's going to take a lot more of logistics and more cost for the students and for yourself. So they ended up narrowing down the option to Belize since they speak English and they are closer. So flights were cheaper as well. So.
Yeah. So that's all the time. Thanks, John, for that question. We have today, and I do want to point out that ACES is coming up, the Association for Counselor Educators and Supervision. We are going to have a lot of IRCEP events there at ACES because it's our 10th anniversary, and we're super excited about that. We're going to be part of the presidential reception. And then also we are going to have a session like this on the International Research Forum, which is another service that IRCEP provides. That meets once a month and is a support for people who are conducting or interested in conducting international research. They meet the first Monday of each month. And on November 15th, from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, we will be having the next webinar specifically focused on the International Research Forum. So if you're interested in learning more about that, that'll be a great time, and I'll be putting that on SESNet and other places. And I will be sending everybody the slides that came today, so you will get the PowerPoint slides and have those available to you as well. Okay, I'll stay on if anybody has any other questions or concerns. Otherwise, thank you so much, panelists. You were wonderful. I knew you guys would have such a wealth of information. I so enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much for having us. Very nice meeting you,
you.
everybody. And you can contact us if you need us as well, at any time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.